Hi, and welcome back to the SecurityMetrics podcast. I am so excited today because I have back with me again Heff and Forrest. We've talked to them before. They're a wealth of knowledge about security from a SOC perspective. And given all of the craziness with COVID right now, given all the people that are working remotely and some of the threats and vulnerabilities that have changed because of it, both threats and vulnerabilities have changed because of it. We have a whole list of things that we want to talk about that are going to help people who are at home trying to make sure that their home setups are secure. So
yeah, we tried to put. Well, first of all, thank you for inviting us back. We love talking to everybody, and Forrest and I have been very busy, and it's been pretty exciting the changes that we've seen since this whole pandemic has started.
Sure, and I forgot to. There are people who are just joining us for the first time today. Please do introduce yourself.
Sure, I am Heff. I am the director of the SOC Operations, which is a acronym for Security Operations Center. And essentially, we have a team of folks here, and we're looking for bad guys. We're looking for threat actors, and on behalf of our clients.
And we have Forrest. Forrest, do you want to introduce yourself as well, Forrest?
Yeah, I am an analyst in the Security Operations Center, so I, on the daily, am trying to find the nefarious goings-on and nip it in the bud, help alert our clients to anything fishy going on in their environment. So I get to dig through a lot of really fun logs and try and find where things are going awry.
Such a great job living on the side of the angels. For people who really are tuning in for the first time this week, I'm Jen Stone. I'm Principal Security Analyst for SecurityMetrics. And I love being able to do this podcast because, there's writing reports and then there's talking to cool people. And today...
Thank you for the coolness.
I'm excited to be here with cool people. So we have a few really key things that we can tell people about how do we protect. What would you state as the number one way to protect from threats right now?
I'll have to tell you that Forrest and I have seen a lot of things, and there's a lot of trends going on right now in the world of cybersecurity. If I had to put number one out there, I don't know about you, Forrest. What would you say is number one right now going on in the world?
Personally, just from what I've seen far too frequently, is installing updates for me. That is the thing that I'm going to hammer home the most. Make sure you're staying on top of your updates, and the software that you're running does have updates available. Is it still supported, or is this some abandonware that has been, not in service for the last decade? You find some crazy stuff that way.
And Jen, the thing that's really coming up time and time again, especially in 2020 right now, is just the huge number of patches that just keep coming out from all these big name companies.
Right.
And we actually, there's a really cool term called Fujiyara Effect, and it's when two hurricanes collide.
Oh, Fujiyara.
Fujiyara, yes.
I've never heard of this. Okay.
I probably butchered the saying, folks, but it's this where you have, these major corporations, they're just putting out all these updates and patches. And for a lot of organizations and businesses, just trying to keep ahead of that stuff is a challenge. And if you could... get to the point where you can automate some of that patching, and that helps.
Absolutely. I talk to a lot of people who, one of the things that I have to look at is what's your patch state? On your critical items, show me what your, history of patching is. And a lot of times they'll say, well, we didn't patch because we thought it would break things, or we don't need this new functionality. Like they don't understand that updates actually have to do with security. There's a disconnect there.
Big time. And to kind of wrap up this whole patching thing is we're really excited from a cyber perspective, the future. And you talk so much about self-healing endpoints, and oh my gosh, if we could just automate all this patching, it wouldn't be such a burden on businesses. But I think Forrest is right. It's just really getting that patch management under control. That really just seems to be the number one thing that we keep seeing time and time again with our clients. So,
and do you think it's because it really is just a big job and really needs the manpower at the organizations just isn't there? Or do you think it's more of a misunderstanding about patching or what should be patched? Where do you think that disconnect comes from?
I'll pivot to Forrest. What are your thoughts, Forrest?
I actually encountered a really neat discussion about this just within the last week or so. I'm trying to remember. It was somewhere online. Anyway, the discussion was a lot of the time people are really hesitant to install updates because things have a tendency to break when they're installing updates. And the hardest part of being a system administrator is if you're installing updates and everything is broken, that, is an incentive to avoid it. Everything's been humming along nicely, and you don't want to have to interfere anytime you can. So a lot of the discussion kind of evolved into, well, the only time that people are rebooting machines is once they've installed updates. So was it the reboot that broke it, or was it the update? And having the resources available, especially trying to contact, say, like Microsoft or somebody, it's like, oh, your update broke it, and it's like, okay, then Microsoft's, well, prove it,
Right.
and so it's a lot of headache for people, and they just find it easier to avoid it. And so in that sense, if it does come as part of like regular maintenance and kind of going into some like business continuity stuff, in the event of a restart, is everything going to recover from that? So kind of some interesting points there.
And to your point, some of the most successful groups that I've seen dealing with this have an actual sandboxing area where they say, all right, this is similar to our production environment or our organizational work environment. We're going to start it there first and see what happens. But it's really hard to have a sandbox environment that is super similar to your production environment, because then you have additional people that need to support that, additional resources and different licensing, all of that. So the whole patching problem, it gets fed a lot of issues from different directions.
It cascades, and that's really what it comes down to. So
To the, which effect was that?
the Fujiyara Effect, two hurricanes colliding.
Yeah.
So
All right. So takeaway from that, patch your systems. It's really important.
you make a plan. Yeah, and absolutely. You get that patch management going, and it's this cascading effect. And that kind of leads us into number 2, in our opinion. And if I had to choose number 2 and tell everyone out there, organizations, businesses, no matter what size you are, it's about having a plan for business continuity,
Right.
and getting that business resiliency, the planning around that under control. So
Right. And so what do they need to do to start that? Let's say a company doesn't have any kind of business continuity. They haven't thought about resiliency. What do they do?
Forrest, do you want to take that one?
My opinion, focus on what you can't possibly stand to lose. A great example of this is I have a family member that runs a small business, and they run everything off of a single computer with QuickBooks. And probably about every 3 years or so, I'll get a call from them completely panicked. Their QuickBooks is inaccessible, and they've lost like an entire year's worth of financial information. And what are they going to do? That real panic scenario. And so I've gone through multiple times and set up backup systems, and made sure that in the event something goes awry, we have a way to get that back. And so that safety net is very important. Identifying what is absolutely irreproducible, what is unique, and what is going to take a week's worth of work to get back, but you can at least get it back. So identifying those things where it's like, we absolutely cannot afford to lose this, otherwise we just cease to exist as a company, versus, okay, this is going to be more painful, but at least we can recover from it.
Exactly. And there's terms for it, the RTO and the RPO, and I forget what exactly they stand for right now. Sorry. But the two key metrics are, how much information can we stand to lose if things go down? How quickly and the second one is, how quickly do we need to reestablish? So some groups can stand to go for a long time, but they can't stand to lose any information. And some are vice versa. Some of them have a little more latitude, and some of them we can't stand to lose any information, and we can't be down for any time at all. And those are the groups that do the hot failovers, as opposed to, hey, you've got your QuickBooks machine that if it fails, and they can call Forrest, you can get it going again in a few days.
You know, the quote that comes to mind so much in this category is failing to plan means planning to fail. Is that right? Did I get it right?
Yeah, I think that's right.
Yeah, I mean, you know, if you're asking where to start, I mean, really, it is about knowing your crown jewels. It's about knowing which data in your organization is so important, and then you can start to build that resiliency and that planning all around there. In 2020, we've had a lot of changes globally because of the pandemic, because of all these other things, and so many organizations. They put the business planning, the continuity planning, and the resiliency to the side. But now's the perfect time to start be thinking about things like doing your tabletop exercises.
Right.
Get your folks into the room and just start planning on what happens if this server goes down. What happens if this critical piece of data gets exposed? I think that's a key place to start. And it's not just the tabletop exercises and knowing that you're doing your backups and you're scheduling that stuff. But it's also looking at your playbooks and your processes and your policies. Do we have policies or processes in place that could potentially cover if we get breached? And a lot of companies don't have those answers.
I think that the key to that is not just having your security people in the room, but making sure the business is involved. And so a lot of times I see where there is a gap of, well, we did all this planning for the systems themselves, but we don't know enough about the business processes to know what's important, how quickly, or how much we can lose.
I think a really great way of kind of simplifying that and easing your way into it is instead of making it this big horrific ordeal, just presenting it as an across the organization exercise by looking at the headlines. What went horrifically wrong with some other company? What made the news? And then try and put yourself in that position. What would happen, for instance, if we were to get hit with ransomware, or what would happen if, our shipping network was no longer available, things like that, where it's easy to just kind of drop yourself in place and say, how do we adapt to that? Can we adapt to it?
Yeah.
So then you're not thinking of them all on your own. You can actually use real world scenarios that are readily available to find.
Yeah, exactly.
It's not just a matter of if it will happen, it's a matter of when it will happen. So just that business continuity planning is so critical. And that's why we put it at number 2 on our list. So
moving on to number 3, what would you say? Well, we have in our list. So maybe not to pressure you to go in order anymore, but let's just go along with our list. What's the third here that we can talk about?
Forrest, what do you think?
What is your external exposure?
Okay.
What does the internet see? What is some script kiddie on the other side of the globe running scans? Are you showing that you have an old camera system exposed somewhere? Are they going to try and poke at it and hack that? Do you have a web server that hasn't been patched? Going back to number 1, is that going to be their point of leverage? So knowing what you have on that broad perspective of a global view, that's exposed, and the barrier is very low because anyone in the world would be able to see that potentially.
Right. With not even very much experience or knowledge, and some pretty limited tools, you can find out what is open there on the internet. Right.
Yeah. And that's what's amazing about all of this is that the threat actors love scanning, and you should too in your organization. Make that a priority. And it may seem like it's not a big deal, but it really is. I mean, if you're not scanning and looking at your external exposure, it could really cascade into something real nasty real quick.
And I like what you said just now. I'm sure that you've seen this, Forrest, as well, as people might have scanning, but do they look at the actual results? Right? So that disconnect between having a report that you can read, and is anyone actually reading it and responding to it?
Yeah. And it's I would even categorize in there under external exposures. It's not just the scanning piece, but it's looking at your third-party relationships, looking at your vendor contracts.
Right.
Do you have language in those contracts to protect you from breach notification language?
Right.
Now's the time before those contracts expire. Start to be thinking about how do we protect our data at rest? Is it in the contract?
Right.
Data encrypted? Is it in the contract? I think that's really critical. And that cyber due diligence is all part of that external exposure. So
Sure. And it's interesting to me, especially working with new customers. Sometimes I'll go in and I'll say, all right, who are your service providers? Who are the vendors that we have to care about in terms of your security? And a lot of times I'll say, we really don't have any.
yeah, it's not a
And
priority.
my response is, shut up. You have like 6 or 7. I'll start listing some that I think you have, and you stop me when I'm right. And
right,
because
right.
we can't do things in a vacuum anymore, right? We have the we're in the cloud. That there's a service provider. We have shredding companies that come in. We have third-party SIEMs. We have all sorts of tools that reside somewhere else on the internet that we're relying on for our security in our environments. And so realizing that, yes, those exist, and that every single vendor and third party that we deal with is a potential risk for us,
Big time.
then that has to be factored in.
And that kind of that's a nice segue into probably one of our other top things that businesses should be looking at, and that's just having an inventory. And the inventory is not just of what apps are in your environment. It's not just an inventory of what services are in your environment. It's what devices are there, which contracts do you have in place, which policies do you have about security. I mean, knowing just starting off with an audit of what you have is critical.
This is really hard. It's not to be poo-pooed in any way. Especially, I go into a lot of healthcare organizations, and I'll say, okay, can you get me a list of your inventory? Like just the beginning edges of let's start scoping your environment so we know exactly what we're looking at, what exists in it, what needs to be protected, and they don't know even where to start to find an inventory. Do you have any recommendations for figuring that out?
Boy, Forrest, I'll lean on you here for just a second.
There was an app that I had seen a few months back, and I wish I could immediately remember it offhand. But it's essentially just a way of doing network scans and trying to map up those relations. There's a few different options. There's some that are like port scanner based. There's some that, depending on the perspective, you could for instance, collect like ARP tables from your networking equipment, traffic flows, watching what traffic is going across your network and, to where, from where, trying to get a better idea that way. There's so many different approaches you could go through and try and track it down physically. There's so many different ways that you could try and approach that problem, because it's multifaceted, and not just from a like a computing equipment perspective, but also from like services. You're going to have to talk to multiple departments across the board, like even your receptionist, who's familiar with people that are coming in and out regularly in the business. We have our printer guy that comes in and drops off paper. That's a potential point. There's a cleaning crew. Do you have a business that comes in and does your cleaning for you? That's a potential avenue. There's so many aspects where we're very interconnected, and no business is an island for sure.
It's mind-blowing how many different services are running in a business that they don't know about, how many different apps, how many even just your knowing the end of life of your assets. I mean, so many businesses don't realize that Windows 7 not supported anymore, but yet we continually see that in our scans.
But we've always used Windows 7.
Yeah.
Why are you telling us we can't use it anymore?
We didn't know. So now you know, and it's definitely time to take action. But beyond all those two, again, that cyber governance piece. So inventorying your policies, your procedures. Do we have playbooks in place? Do we know what's going on? Have they been updated? I mean, we have a policy, but we haven't looked at it in 3 years, so we have no clue. So now's the time. Get the inventory started. Look at everything that's going on.
Right.
So.
I like to ask people about their policies and procedures. I'll ask people who actually are supposed to be implementing the procedures, following the procedures, implementing the policies, and I ask them, how inaccurate is this? How far is this from how you actually do it? Yeah. And a lot of times they'll tell you it is night and day. And so trying to get them to update it so that it's actually a usable document. So one of the ways I found that makes it useful is you say, all right, let's say that you were not able to come in for a month or 6 weeks. 2 months. You're out of the picture, but you're coming back. You want the person who is there doing your job for you to do it so they don't mess up everything you've got going on, so you don't have a big ball of knots to come back to you, right?
And it's a ball. It's a mess.
Right?
Yeah,
So
right.
if they have the right procedures to follow, it's going to be less work for you when you come back. And so if you kind of think of it in those terms of how do I look at policies and procedures so that they would potentially be useful in some scenario somewhere, if they're just an exercise to satisfy an auditor, nobody's going to do them, right? So think of it in a way that is actually going to be useful and make your job easier at some point. Could be useful to training, bringing new people on, right? So just kind of a mindset about policies and procedures can make them a better document.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah, I this is one area that I think having a terrible memory is actually a huge benefit. My memory is utter garbage, and I will forget something in a couple weeks, and it's gone because I just have so much information that I'm trying to go through on a day-to-day basis that I can't just pick things out of the air and, oh yeah, I remember that thing. So in those cases, like having that documentation there is a huge boon for me. It's like, I don't remember this particular thing. Let me go look it up.
Yeah.
Having those playbooks where you can just go down the checklist is amazing, especially if you're in a very high stress scenario. Going back to that business continuity, if your server racks are down and your business is bleeding money, you're going to be in a very high stress state of mind. So being able to recall everything at drop of a hat is a nigh impossible task. There's going to be something that you miss. So having that written out so you never need to worry about it in the event that you panic and you freeze. It's like, okay, what do I do? Grab the book. It will tell me what to do. Awesome.
Right. And it creates consistency too. For the people just doing day-to-day, it's best if you can automate things, all the things.
Absolutely, yes.
But there are still manual procedures that people follow. There was a company that I worked for quite a few years ago that had a very, very hours and hours long release process. And when we started digging into it, it was because different people were doing the release each week. It was a weekly release, and they were doing it in different ways. And I said, all I want you to do is the next person who does this release, write down step by step exactly what you do. And then next week, the guy who does it that time, tell me where there is a differential in how you do it opposed to how the other guy did. So we were able to do a consistent procedure that reduced the amount of rollbacks that were happening regularly every time. Oh, that didn't work. Dang it. Let's roll it back. And oh, what step did we miss? Oh, here we go. Put it in there, right? So these types of activities are super helpful. And these are your procedures that suddenly it's not just a compliance thing. It's something that actually helps people with their jobs, takes the burden off of them because consistency is created.
That is a good segue into our next top favorite one.
Excellent.
And I think the audience is going to like this one more than anything. It's all about digital empathy, in our opinion. And if you had to ask Forrest and I what is probably the most important thing, and it would probably be the digital empathy and your day-to-day cyber hygiene. Mm-hmm. And if you have to categorize that, that's things like your passwords and multi-factor authentication. And I guess there's a perception out there when people think of cyber. What do you think of?
Cold. Difficult.
Difficult, yes.
So hard. Why are you talking to me about these words that I can't remember? And how am I even doing this job? What? Who hired me?
Why are they making it difficult?
Right? You know, these cyber things, technology. And yet we've been in this for years and years and years, and we feel this way. Just imagine how people who are not on the technical side of things day to day, how do they feel about
It's
this?
those cyber people. They're making our jobs difficult again.
Don't even come around. I don't want to talk to you.
And, I feel awful at times when you hear that from people. And that's not the job of cybersecurity. It's not there to make the business more difficult. We're not there to be the police department.
Sure.
We're there to lift off. We want the businesses to succeed, but we want it to do it securely. And that's the challenge here. And I think if you asked Forrest and I to go down a list of cyber hygiene, your day-to-day, things that if you did these things with all these employees potentially working remotely, what would make a difference in their lives?
Right. So how do we bridge that gap? How do we bring more digital empathy into the hygiene side of things, which hygiene, we're talking about passwords, right? We're talking about multi-factor. We're talking about the regular day-to-day things that make everybody go, oh, why are you talking to me about this again?
Right. I've heard this a million times. I know I have to change my password.
Right. So how does digital empathy help with that?
I would refer to Forrest. What do you think? Because I've got a couple ideas here too.
I think it's interesting that I see a lot of people get very burnt out when it comes to anything tech related. A great example is my fiance. I love her to death. Anytime I go to use her phone, I see she has 3,000 plus notifications, and instantly just my heart rate goes through the ceiling. How can you keep track of everything that's going on with that? It's very overwhelming, and trying to make sure that all of that stuff is okay is a very tall order for sure. And I think it's all about incremental. It's not how do you eat the elephant? One bite at a time. You just got to take it bit by bit. And if that's unsubscribing from some junk mail list and knowing that you're never going to have to deal with that, again, any more emails from that provider, what takes 2 minutes now can save you 10 minutes down the road.
Yes.
And just little baby steps,
Like you, I live that zero inbox lifestyle. And it makes me so I can sleep at night. I'm not kidding you. I don't go to bed until I have 10 or fewer messages in all my inboxes.
That's impressive.
Which I have probably 10, 11 inboxes because I have side hustles, right?
Of course.
And so, but the only way to do that is what Forrest was saying. But then when I try and explain that to other people, they're like, what are you telling? I don't know how to get rid of this other. They don't even know it. They don't even know that these tools are available to automate that whole zero inbox experience, right? Yeah. So just like with multi-factor, just like with passwords, just like with, how do I get rid of all of this in my inbox? These are little things that people have to do every day, day to day, that if you give them a little bit of knowledge that's not frightening or overwhelming, I think that was a good word, was overwhelmed. Yeah. If you give them a little bit of knowledge so that they can self-manage things that previously were overwhelming, that it makes it, that elephant is just that much smaller.
And for an organization perspective, enabling multi-factor authentication, that's the start of the journey, and ensuring the passwords are complex. But again, you think about putting myself in the shoes of the users of every organization and business. And that's a struggle because I want the business to be secure, but I also don't want to cause more undue burden and bureaucracy and all those other things that go into not having digital empathy. And boy, that's critical. In this day-to-day cyber hygiene, doing the little baby steps to get your organization more secure, it starts with that digital empathy. So
I'm glad that we talked, but I think we could spend a whole hour on digital empathy, the concept, and how do we, in real life, take action to close that gap and make it so people are less overwhelmed and less burdened by cybersecurity. Cybersecurity is here to stay, and making it so that people can have it a seamless part of their business life and their regular lives. Yeah. I think it's a tall order, but I think it's something we could discuss at some point. So I think, hey, Hunter, we should put that on our list. What do you think?
Right,
He's like, don't break that fourth wall, Jen. So yeah, in a future time, let's talk more about digital empathy. I think it's an important topic. So, that kind of takes us to something else here on our list, which is the human side of things. Let's talk about vishing. All right. Do we have to call it vishing? Isn't it just phishing with another avenue, or
we add another letter in front of it.
Okay.
Which we'll probably have, maybe in 10 years from now, we'll have all the letters of the alphabet in front of the word phishing. So we'll have vishing, zishing, dishing, mishing, nishing. I don't know. We'll just keep coming up with them.
I feel like I'm Dr. Seussing it. Okay, tell people what vishing is in case they haven't heard the term.
So this has been a huge trend. And vishing is really all about that combination of voice and phishing. Have you gotten any vishing attacks on your phone?
Well, I don't answer my phone.
Oh, see, that's the solution right there, Forrest.
So I also haven't set up my voicemail box. If you want to talk to me, you kind of have to either really know me well so that I'll recognize your number, or send me an email, because it's too easy to fall for things, right? Yeah. So I'm not going to answer every phone call that comes through. I figure if it's an emergency, they know me well enough. If it's an emergency that I have to be involved in, there's other ways that they can get to me, right?
Right.
But if they're going to call me and be like, oh, here's an emergency you need to respond to, I don't need that kind of energy in my life.
Well, what the threat actors are doing right now, and this has been ongoing for a long time, but it's only been recently because of the pandemic and all of these people working from home, working remote, is they're masquerading their caller ID. So you're getting a call and you're thinking it's coming from grandma or somebody that you do business with, and it's not.
Or it looks really similar to your own phone number. And so you think, oh, this looks a lot like my number. It must be a neighbor.
Right.
Or
they're even masquerading 800 numbers. So you're thinking it's your doctor calling, and it's not, And what they're trying to do is essentially gain a doorway into your life. And the more doorways that the threat actor has into your life, that is what they're after. And, for a lot of folks, the challenge is they think in their mind, I don't have anything of value. There's nothing on my personal computer or on my phone that has value. But the reality is what a lot of threat actors do is they'll pivot from your personal life into your work life. And that's where the trick becomes, where you need to be aware of that. So you may not think you have anything of value on your home computer, but the bad guy doesn't know that. And he's going to use whatever tool he can. And in this case, the human side of things is the vishing, the social engineering piece, to try to pivot from that personal life into your work life.
Right. And do you know why social engineering works? That because it makes you feel a thing. Right?
Emotionally.
It makes you feel a thing, and you get a sense of urgency to do a thing because you feel a thing. I had a really good conversation with one of my nieces just this week about that. And because she was asking me, great kid, but a lot of that generation, they have some knowledge of cybersecurity, they have some knowledge of what social engineering is, but it's still new. Even for the cyber generation, they still are not familiar with how is it a negative thing? What are the bad guys doing? Right? We all need to learn this. So I was talking to her, and it morphed into a conversation about also how do I use this to understand what my friends are saying to me, to understand what social media is saying to me, to understand what the news is saying to me.
So let me give you a great use case. So imagine, you have a LinkedIn profile.
I do.
And I'm a recruiter from a fake company. I'm the threat actor. What I'll do is I'll set up a fake PDF file. I'll pretend I'm from a major corporation. I want to hire you. Yeah. Hey, I found your profile on LinkedIn. I'm going to send you a PDF. Go ahead and fill it out for me. Send it back to me. You didn't know that PDF had some malware in it.
Right.
And the next thing you know is the bad guy now has a doorway into your life. And that's the challenge for any business out there, is helping educate your employees that everyone is the human firewall, and we all are security experts. No matter if you're a line level employee, you're a manager, or you're on the board of directors, everyone is a part of that cybersecurity team. So the goal here under human side of things is really focusing on the training piece, the education piece, the awareness piece. Sure. And again, just because you don't think you have anything of value on your computer, the reality is the bad guys may think you do. And that's the key here. Yeah. Once you're aware of it, that's half the battle. And once your employees are aware of it.
Sure. So. And just remember, if something makes you feel something and you need to respond right away, that's social engineering. Somebody got you. So just back away, get some perspective on that. Don't respond right away. Whatever avenue that kind of a push came at you from, don't react to it, set it aside, and then later when you're not upset about whatever it was or wherever it came from, you can come back to it and reevaluate it later.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, a lot of really successful social engineering usually will try and feed off of our innate desire to help others, or reciprocity. So reciprocality. There we go. Right?
Right. No.
That works.
They're both right. It's good. It's fine.
The whole thing is reciprocal, right?
Yes.
So say you get a call from somebody and they're like, "Hey, I'm with your insurance. We have these documents that need to be submitted to make sure that your coverage continues." So automatically the stage has been set that this person is there to help you, and then you want to then help them help you. It really is exploiting our desire to do good with others. I mean, it's something that you see with, like, for example, with a car sale. I'll scratch your back if you scratch mine, kind of thing, and just playing off of those relationships.
Right. That's why the Nigerian prince worked for as long as, and it still does sometimes. You help me and I will give you money for it. So, it kind of, what we're talking about with the social engineering, and you might not think anything is important on what you have, it kind of feeds into that endpoint protection concept, right? Yeah. So people are like, well, I'm on my home computer and it's not, I'm curious, I'm worked up or whatever. I'm going to click on this thing. It's fine. It's not connected to work. But sometimes people use their work computer at home now. It's more of a problem because we are all working from home. So how does endpoint protection help protect us from some of these social engineering issues?
There's a lot of security features. I think it's key, though. We probably should define what is an endpoint.
Yes.
A lot of people are probably wondering, what the heck is an endpoint? What does it do? I'm hearing the term. It seems like it's this new thing. It's been around for a while. You're seeing it a lot at the enterprise level and big corporations, and now it's starting to kind of trickle down into small businesses and medium-sized businesses. Forrest, do you want to help me describe it in your most beautiful language that you can?
Any number of things could be considered an endpoint. Your phone, especially with bring your own device things. You have a company that you then set up your work email on your personal phone, but is your personal phone secure? The work laptop that you've been issued, that's definitely an endpoint. What about the home computer that you've been using to VPN in? That is now brought in under the umbrella of endpoint as far as your company's concerned. So there's a lot of things that could be considered endpoints. It's amazing the number of different devices that I see in some of these environments. People have internet jukebox. Is there anything going on there? And why is that on the same network as some of your cash registers? Things like that. That's a little scary sometimes. I've seen gaming consoles in people's business environments, stuff that people have no idea. All kinds of smart speakers, whether it's a Google Home or an Alexa, things. You start looking and you find all kinds of really interesting devices in these environments.
And so basically, an endpoint is anything that can communicate to the internet.
And it can help each of the boxes become more secure. I mean, that's really the summary. I mean, if you have unsecured browsers in your environment, a web browser that's unsecure, if you need to get antivirus updates pushed out and get them on all the machines, if you need some sort of automation to get some of that patch management done, that's really where the endpoint shines. And you're seeing more and more growth in this market. It's going to continue. You're going to hear a lot more about it now with everyone working remote. And they've got all these computers at their house, and they need that endpoint protection. So you're going to hear a lot more about it. The key, though, with endpoints is realizing that for an IT department, they don't have a lot of staff. They don't have a lot of people on the team to help them update and do all that kind of stuff. So anything that a business can do to help automate and, again, have that digital empathy to not create an undue burden on everyone's computers, that's where the endpoint really shines. So,
and Forrest, you briefly touched on something that I think is an interesting concept that I'd like to try to explain a little bit, and that is if you have a gaming computer or a gaming system that can reach out to the internet, and it's on the same network as your work computer, so the security of this gaming device might not be the same as the security of your work device. Why does it matter? Well, let's say you get a virus or some type of malware on this gaming device. It can possibly transmit to your work device if it's on the same subnet, right? So think about, let's say you have a Sharpie in your pocket and you put your pants through the wash, and then in the dryer, the lid comes off, and all of a sudden your pants get all marked up, and then your shirt gets marked up, and then your wife's dress gets marked up because they all happen to be in the same dryer together, right? So it's like malware on one device in a subnet can transmit to other devices on that subnet, just like a Sharpie in the dryer. I use the Sharpie in the dryer because
good analogy.
I've done that a few times with actual Sharpies in my dryer.
I'm sorry to hear that.
So I know
Yeah.
more than I like to admit, but a lot of people don't know that having them on the same network, if they're not both protected, can open them both up to possible issues. So it's important to really make sure you have protections on those endpoints. But it also kind of makes us think about another concept that you also had on your list, which was those zero trust networks. What if we didn't care about the subnet itself? What if we were so protected in our endpoints that we didn't have to care about that subnet and all being in the dryer together?
Yeah.
Can you speak to that a little bit?
Sure. The whole idea of zero trust, and this is really just, it's a term that's really been taking off as well. And you're going to hear a lot more about this going forward. And zero trust is this security model. And essentially it's, for a lot of organizations, it's we don't trust our employees. But I don't want to call it that. But you know, at the end of the day, you want to do what's best for the business, and you want to kind of have that mindset of nothing is secure, even if it's inside of our network, even if it's behind our firewall, in the perimeter or not. Nothing is secure. Right. And that zero trust model, then it's a mindset, it's an approach, it's a model, it's a form of architecture, it's a lot of things. But, you know, for businesses that have never heard that term before, now's the time to kind of start thinking about it, because you're going to hear a lot more about it. Coming up with a strategic plan for zero trust. And even if you're not planning on purchasing any devices, buying any services, at least getting it on your radar to start having those conversations, now's a good time. And you know, part of that is that's what's nice about endpoints. The future is you're going to hear a lot more about self-healing endpoints and things like configuration drift, which is a really cool term. But at the end of the day, here's what Forrest and I see. And what we see is we see advanced persistent threat actors. They're getting into environments. And once they're getting in, they're doing a lot of lateral movements. They get in, they make these lateral movements, they find something of value, and then they try to exfiltrate it off the network. And how they exfiltrate it off, they use a lot of different tools. But once they find that thing of value, and once that data is out there, you can't get it back. Once your crown jewels are exposed, boy, it's really hard to get it back. So, and seeing how long some of these threat actors, when they get on the network, they just sit there. They just want to hang out, and they wait until they find a target of value. So I guess the challenge to everyone in the audience is that everything we've talked about today, it's a lot. But you know, you start, like Forrest said, you eat an elephant in bites, and you just start picking off these things off of a checklist. What can you control and change and try to improve upon without creating undue burden or bureaucracy to the business, having that digital empathy. So.
And we joked a little bit about it. Zero trust is not really about not trusting your employees. It's more about we don't trust old ways that we secured things.
Beautiful.
Right?
Yeah,
so we had some old patterns where we would say, hey, if you have access to this group, you have access to this system and this system and this system, they all get to talk to each other. Now we don't trust that they should be able to talk to each other. We don't trust that having a group is sufficient, right? So creating segmentation, micro-segmentation, and making sure that access control is just really nailed down. That's really more where we're headed. So just thinking about some of these new paradigms I can't believe I just used the word new paradigm. Somebody just yelled bingo out there.
We should do that. We should have podcast bingo. Every time Jen says this certain word, you guys get a prize at home.
But being able to look at how do we protect things, and what's the new ways that we have to protect things based on new threats, based on the new landscape, right?
And that's a good point too. You know, you talk about role-based protection and the zero trust. If you know a certain department in your company or your business has the potential to be attacked more than other departments, that's where that zero trust can really be beneficial. I mean, if you have a certain department that handles a lot of cash transactions or a lot of HIPAA data, you know, you can segment them off and do some really amazing things to stop threat actors. So
when I travel, I take a secured laptop that I don't leave any information on it. But there are a couple of countries I travel to that are inherently more risky because of geolocation. And I don't take my laptop. I take a completely fresh, like a Chromebook, right? This is not about trusting me with the device. It is about the level of risk based on where I'm at and what I'm doing. But
Awesome.
but Forrest, I wanted to hear about your perspective on that.
Yeah, I like to look at the whole zero trust model as essentially planning for the worst case scenario and trying to preemptively implement damage control. If this were to get exposed, what could possibly go wrong, and how can we reduce the impact of it? So a good example I like to use is like loyalty cards or something. So you sign up for a loyalty card, and now they've got their phone number, and are they going to sell that to a marketing list? Like, what's going to happen with that information? A lot of it is trying to scope it as, is this necessary? To what extent does it need to be a thing, and evaluating the benefit? Is this even worth whatever benefit we're getting from it? Does it outweigh the risk? So a good example that I've recently started implementing is a catch-all email address. So I have an email address where essentially I can send it to whatever at mydomain.com. So gas card at mydomain, or grocery card at mydomain. And then if I start seeing spam rolling in, I know where that came from. And I can then decide, okay, well, I'm ending that relationship with you because you've violated my trust.
Right. That's a good point. Wow, this is a really good list that we've gone through today for people. Is there anything that I've missed?
We could probably do 4 to 5 hours,
We-
but
I'm-
we don't have that kind of time.
We absolutely could. We would have to order pizza.
But it's always fun, and obviously we'll do a lot more of these with you. Thank you for inviting us into your home and letting us talk. And
Absolutely.
we love finding threat actors. We love finding bad guys, and we love protecting. It's not just the businesses that we protect. We love just that passion to protect. It's our mom and dads. It's our family that shops at a lot of these places that we take it personal when a bad guy gets access. So.
And for the businesses too, because businesses are people. Businesses go down, people suffer.
Yeah.
And so I take my job very personally that way, because I know that every individual who we can protect through better cybersecurity, every business that we can protect through better cybersecurity, it elevates the quality of life that the people associated have. I know that sounded super fancy, but I actually really meant it. Well, thank you both for coming in. Forrest, always a great time talking to both you, and Heff, really appreciate it. Thank you for joining us once again here on the SecurityMetrics podcast. I hope you tune in again. And also, I'm sure that you have people in your life who could benefit from knowing some of these things. I want you to think of who that is right now that needs to hear what we talked about just now. Send it to them. Share this with them. It's okay. Talk to you later. Bye. Thanks for watching. To watch more episodes of SecurityMetrics podcast, click on the box on the left. If you prefer to listen to this podcast, it's available on all your favorite podcast platforms. See you on the slopes.